Brad, I don't know about your neighborhood, but my neighborhood, there's a couple of sort of not old wives' tales, but sort of shared stories that all the neighbors have about this or that happened in the neighborhood, or this whole neighborhood used to be avocado trees back in the day, or kind of shared stories that all the neighbors know. And one shared story that all the neighbors know is that there's a certain house about 2 blocks from my house. And the shared story is, and I have no idea if it's true, but everyone always says, "Oh, that's Shaka Khan's house." And when I first moved in, I was like, A, what a random, wonderful celebrity to have nearby, and B, how does anyone know? No one's ever seen if it's Shaka Khan. No one ever sees Shaka Khan. Shaka Khan's never out walking her dogs. We have no idea if it's actually Shaka Khan. But I take great delight in this whole shared story of like, oh yeah, that's Shaka Khan's house. How does anyone know? Who knows that that's Shaka Khan's house if no one's ever seen her?
You'd think it would be very easy to tell if you're Shaka Khan's neighbor. The woman has 10 Grammys. How can she'd never be able to hide all those Grammys. You'd have to see them through one window or another. There'd be a Grammy award somewhere that you'd see.
Just amazing. Although, I guess certain musicians, they have soundproof rooms. I was going to say you could probably hear music being recorded, but no, not necessarily if you've got one of those expensive built-in rooms. But I love, first of all, Shaka Khan, what a great musician. Second of all, what a weird, shared community story that all my neighbors have is like, oh yeah, that's Shaka Khan's house. How do you know? Who knows? No one has an origin to that. No one ever sees Shaka Khan walking around. We have no idea. But
I'm trying to think if we have any celebrities that are living in my neighborhood, and I can't think of anyone that is a local celebrity that I would have known of.
Past neighborhoods that I've lived in, the local celebrity is like, oh yeah, that's the guy that set fire to the supermarket that one time. That's that's the guy.
Now those kind of celebrities we got.
And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about not setting fire to a supermarket and making comics.
And not setting fire to a supermarket and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, the author of the Webcomics Handbook and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/ComicLab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. We have a fun show for everybody, especially because we invited our wonderful, wonderful pal in cartooning, deSouza, one of our favorite cartoonists, just myriads of skills. But before we do that, I should mention that this show is going out live to our Patreon pals over at patreon.com/ComicLab. At the Live Gab group, you can watch the live stream every week as we record. And there is a concurrent chat running before, during, and after the show where we answer questions for folks and get down to the nitty gritty and the specifics of questions that you might have on the side. So do join us over at patreon.com/ComicLab.
Absolutely. So, Dave, you want to take a question from a Patreon backer? I've got one ready to go.
Let's do it, my friend. Let's do it.
All right. So this one comes in and it says, hey, guys, they say running a creative business like comics is about 50% creating, 25% administration, and 25% marketing. But I hate marketing, mainly because I just don't get it. I'm not good at it. What are your thoughts on hiring someone to help market your comic online? Someone who knows the ins and outs of social media, someone to make and post reels and TikTok videos. I could focus on making comics while they take care of the marketing. Thanks ahead of time for the solid advice. Dave Kellett, hiring a market manager.
Ooh, there's a lot of weight behind this question because while I do understand the mood of I'm not good at X, and so I want to hire someone to do X. I understand that. I get that. The main problem that this runs up against really quickly is, can you build a life in comics? Yes. Can you build a career in comics? Yes. Can you support yourself and with the money you make in comics? Yes. Is it hard to do? Yes. Is there enough money to hire a bunch of other people to do specific tasks for you? Not really, not usually. And so this is one of those things that when you are not good at it, frankly, it's the kind of thing where you got to bear down and get better at it because there's not enough money. There's not enough blood to squeeze from that stone in order to pay you and pay them. You doing the creative, they doing the marketing. That's my first pass reaction. Brad, what is your first pass reaction to this?
Well, to start with, I've never come across a person or an organization that offered to do something like this that I was completely willing to put my trust into. Right. I was always a little bit not so sure of the angle. It never really seemed to hold up water. So I've never been able to really trust somebody to do that. A couple times I've hired like people to do just posting and stuff, but at my direction. Like I would tell them, here's what I want you to do. And then they would do the thing. But I'm still the one running that gig. Right. But what you said really holds water in that if you're spending, for example, let's say you're spending $200 a month for this person to do marketing for you. If you're doing that, then the amount of value that it brings in has got to be equal or greater than $200.
Right.
In fact, favorably, it would be a lot more than $200. Right. So if you're spending $200 and you got one Patreon backer at the $2 level, that person's got to be a Patreon backer for several months before you even get that $200 back. Right. So the economics don't add up for me.
Yeah, and let's remember our basic business model here of what we do and why we do it. We give away our stuff for free because the barrier to entry is next to zero, right? People can try it out. They can go deep if they want. They can share it with friends if they enjoy it. And then they can become a percentage of them a fan. So again, this is me grabbing numbers out of a hat. You give it away to 100,000 people so that 10,000 people become fans, so that 1,000 people buy your book or shirt or movie or whatever it is you're doing, right? And so that's the business model that we're in. So let's bring in a marketing person into this equation. So you are giving away a comic for free. Your barrier to entry is nothing. All someone has to do is read it. So, okay, let's say you're saying to someone, yeah, but I can't get people to read it, so I need a marketing person. Okay, well then to Brad's point, I guess what you're saying is, to grab terminology from other industries, you're looking for someone to help you with customer acquisition. You're willing to spend a couple dollars per customer to bring them in so that they spend $15, $20, $30 on your comic. So to Brad's point, let's say you bring in a marketing person, and it's at an incredibly cheap rate that you're not going to find anyway, at $200 a month. By the way, it's going to be thousands of bucks a month. But let's say you could bring in a college kid fresh out of a marketing degree at $200 a month, right? And they're going to do, I don't know yet. We'll talk about that in a second. But they magically wave their hands and they bring in customers. Well, what does that mean? Did they just bring you more people to add to that 100,000 pile? In which case, then it's your job to make 10,000 of them fans. In which case, it's your job to make 1,000 of them buy the product. What I'm getting at is where does the marketing person fit in that chain of what our business model is? Are they bringing people into the 100,000 group? Are they bringing people into the 10,000 group or into the 1,000 group? Right. And so it's a weird form of customer acquisition. And frankly, the low hanging fruit are all in your hands. You're giving away a comic for free. And if that's not enough enticement, I'm not quite sure what a marketing person can bring to the table.
Well, yeah. And let's go one step further. Let's say I gave you a magic wand and I said I could bring you 1 million people to your website or your social media platform right now. Would you take it? And of course, the answer everybody says is yes. Right. The problem is you've already had 1 million people, right? Over the course of a year or several years on different social media platforms, you've accumulated 1 million people and they've all said no, or they've said not right now. More to the point, they said not right now. You're not ready yet, right? But you've had 1 million people. Bringing 1 million people to your website or to your social media platform of choice isn't going to help you until you take care of a much bigger problem. And the bigger problem is right now, you're doing what Dave suggested. You're putting your work out. If you're like most of us, you're putting your work out on a number of different places. You've got it out on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. You might be doing stuff on YouTube and TikTok. You might have stuff on the different platforms like Webtoons and Tapas. You might be doing all that stuff. You might have a Substack or a newsletter. You're doing all of those things and you're not getting traction. And now you've got to ask yourself, Why am I not getting traction?
Right.
Right. And that takes a lot more closer look at what you're doing. What are you doing that's not working? My opinion, and I've been tracking this stuff for a long time. If you're like 80% of us, you came to comics because you're an artist first and you were drawn to that visual medium and your writing is not hitting the mark. My advice to you, improve your writing. And then that marketing that you're already doing, and all that stuff that you're doing is marketing. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all of that stuff. Webtoons, Tapas. That marketing will start to take traction once your writing improves. But you've got to improve the writing. If you're like most of us, you need to adjust your writing. If you're like and by the way, I said 80%. If you're trying to do humor, in my mind, that number raises to 90% because humor is incredibly difficult to write. And chances are your punchlines aren't landing.
Right.
And then you get a whole nother subset of people that remembered newspaper comics and they're trying to do a long form comic in strip format, right? They're just giving you a little bite of the storyline. They're expecting the readers to memorize that story between updates. Stop and think about who you're publishing for. This person is sitting in front of a conveyor belt that's just whizzing by all day long with content. You're expecting them to remember this one little slice of apple pie that they pulled off maybe a week or a day ago, and remember the storyline points so that when they see it the next time that they can remember that piece of pie. It doesn't work like that. If you're doing long form, you've got to really, really consider how you're presenting this to people. Those are the changes that you need to make. Then once your comic starts to get traction, then we can talk about marketing. But until you fix that, you've got much bigger problems.
Yeah. I want to drill down on what Brad said in terms of you may have already had 1 million people see your comic, right? And because since Brad and I have started our sort of renewed push over on Reddit, one of the things that Reddit on the app does particularly well is it lets you really drill down on who's seeing it, how many people are there right now at that moment looking at that comic, which is sort of fascinating to see, and then the overall sum total. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, because I have the numbers in the back of my head right now, that the last, 10 comics that I put up on Reddit that got really good traction, this is over the last 6 months, I definitely got in front of more than 1 million people. Definitely. I know that without a fact. So ask yourself, why don't I have 1 million readers? Well, in some respects, it's the strength of my writing. It didn't click with people, right? Or to Brad's point, they didn't say no, they said not yet. So my job is to continually put out good work and get it in front of them such that 6 months from now, or, and this is important, 6 years from now, they go, God, I've really enjoyed this guy. This style is really good. He's really consistent. I'm going to go look around and see if I can find a book for him. Oh, he has a whole bunch of books. Okay, great. And the reason I say 6 years is it is not an overnight thing. As Brad always says, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so for that reason, any marketing spend that you did, or a publicist or a PR person that you did for a month or 2 months or 3 months, it doesn't gain you enough in as much as consistent, quality, ever improving work that goes on for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. That's how you get a growing audience that then becomes fans, that then buys books. It's not necessarily through the administrations of a marketeer.
Yeah. And if you spend money on marketing now, if you do that kind of marketing now, you're not only are you wasting money, but you are bringing an entire group of people to a product that isn't ready yet. Right. Here's what I would tell you. Once you start to see significant motion in this sort of thing, right? Your Patreon is taking off. If you're like the garden variety web cartoonist, you might have single digit Patreon numbers, right? Just single digit number of people willing to jump on board a Patreon campaign. That's not bad. It just means that you're starting out and you've got your work cut out for you. You got some improving to do. You start seeing that Patreon jump up like to 20 and to 50 and to 100 to 150. And you see that happening rapidly, and you see that happening consistently. Now that you see you've got traction, a person like that, now I can see maybe you want to bring somebody in and say, this is what I want to do and manage it. But right now you're not getting traction. And that means that you've got a bigger problem to solve.
Yeah. And so let me tell you something. As one of the things that's helpful to me as a cartoonist is to sometimes learn from and glean information off my wife's career, which is very different.
Yeah.
My wife is a TV writer. And when her show in the past has gotten, I don't know, 1 or 2 Emmy nominations and hired a publicist as a result. The reason being for her career, she wanted to, and it was also timed well for contract renegotiations. She wanted to get on Vogue and Cosmo and Entertainment Weekly and Time and this and that because it raised the tide of her contractual weight, right? So she paid, but first of all, very expensive. Second of all, it had a specific and concrete goal, which was different than what you and I have as a concrete goal as cartoonists. So what I did, though, as a cartoonist was I learned from that and I said, okay, next time I'm nominated for an Eisner, I'm going to look into hiring a publicist because maybe I could get into publications that I wouldn't normally based on the strength of like, hey, it's also Eisner nominated and here it's up for an Eisner right now. And hey, this Eisner nominated comic is worth checking out.
Yeah.
So I ran the numbers the last time I got nominated for an Eisner, and I was talking to my wife's publicist about maybe hiring one of their junior publicists, right? At like the cheapest rate I could find. And I ran the numbers and I was like, what am I buying here in terms of like, this doesn't gain me anything in what I need to do, which is to get eyeballs to slowly and consistently return to my comics over the course of years. This gives me a little juice into like, maybe I get a tiny 1-inch by 1-inch box at the very back of Entertainment Weekly. Okay.
Right.
How does that, aside from ego, how does that help my career? Right.
Precisely.
The thing that helps my career is me consistently producing good work, posting it on my site and sharing it via, sort of a syndication process to Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, all the other places you can imagine, getting it out for as many people as possible, such that those 100,000 people winnow down to 10,000 fans, winnow down to 1,000 people buying the book. And that takes years. That's years of consistent work. And I don't know that any temporary boost from a marketeer or a publicist, I keep calling them marketeers because I kind of like that. I don't know that we're not the right industry that helps,
Yeah. And not only that, but what they're going to do is they're going to sell you. And by the way, this goes, let's just take that off the table just for a second and just replace it with like let's say you're going to do a DIY thing like Google ads, or, you're going to do that kind of a pursuit, right? You're going to end up going on to a situation where you get either baffled by raw numbers or sold on increments. Right. So either they're going to say, look at these large numbers of people that we exposed your work to. You wanted eyeballs. We gave you eyeballs. Look at this large number, which, by the way, is meaningless if they're bouncing off your site or bouncing off your social media platform. Right. You can throw
which will happen, by the way. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And then what happens is, and I've consulted with people like this. They say, I'm doing Google ads. And I am putting my stuff out there and look at these large numbers. And I said, okay, fantastic. Let's put it to the test. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, turn the ads off for a month. And we were talking about a website at this point. So we were tracking on a granular level his website traffic. He says, why do you want me to do that? I said, let's see how many of them you're keeping. It doesn't matter those numbers that you're buying to get people to come to the site. It matters how many you're keeping. He goes, I've tried. I've had months where I couldn't afford to do it, he says, what happens is the number drops down to the level that it was. He goes, I'll lose all those people. I said, you ain't losing all those people. You never had them. You're getting people thrown at your site and you ain't keeping them. And you know it because you don't want to turn these ads off because you know what happens to the level of numbers when it does. So they're either going to sell you on numbers and baffle you with numbers, or they're going to sell you on increments. Take a look. You had a 0.5% increase last month. You had a 25% increase in this specific demographic. Dad, that's great news. Keep on going. They're going to either baffle you with numbers or they're going to sell you on increments. And either way, it means that they've found a sucker and you're going to keep paying for nothing.
Yeah. And like, listen, customer acquisition for a company that sells a widget, let's just call it the super widget, right? And they sell a super widget on the website, and they go out to a marketing, to an advertising, to a PR firm, and they say, we need you to move more super widgets. That is trackable. That's quantifiable. That is something that if you spend $10,000 on a month of advertising as the super widget company, but you sell $40,000 more super widgets, you can track that. That's quantifiable. Your customer acquisition is sort of a 1-to-4 ratio there. You know what you're dealing with. Great. Bada bing, bada boom. It's weirder and more nebulous and more squishy is what I'm getting at when you're a cartoonist, where your customer acquisition is, all right, you're going to bring more eyeballs to the site. Okay, great. The marketer brought more eyeballs to the site. The advertising brought more eyeballs to the site. It's exactly what Brad was saying. Are they sticking around? That's up to you. That's not a marketer. And so let's go back to that million people that I know that I saw on Reddit coming across my comics. How many of those did I acquire as permanent readers? I will tell you, because I kind of know it's in the dozens. Out of a million eyeballs, I'm not joking. It's in the dozens out of a million eyeballs that saw those 10 comics, right? A million, keep in mind, a million people saw it. I gained dozens of permanent readers, maybe less, by the way, maybe less, because it's somewhat nebulous. Anyway, what I'm getting at is only through the process of repetition and years of continually producing good work do those dozens become hundreds, and those hundreds become thousands, and those thousands become the people that I need to kickstart a book, right? And that is my marketing. I don't need to pay when I can reach a million eyeballs on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, all the sites. That is where they come in handy. They give me the eyeballs for free. Let's all be honest about it. That's where they come in handy. My job is to produce good enough work that they come back, and that takes time and consistent good work.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but I've been meaning to bring this up with you for a while. And I want to see if you're the same as me. My thinking on social media has evolved a little bit in the last couple of months, mainly because of my experience on Reddit. And I wanted to run this past you because it really has changed the way I've thought about marketing on social media. And it's this, as the more I go, the less I'm really interested in engagement, the way we've been taught to be interested in engagement, right? I'm not so much looking for the favorites. I'm not so much looking for the shares. I'm not even so much looking for the comments. At this point, I'm just looking for raw numbers. I'm just looking for when I post something on Reddit. When you say raw
numbers, what does that mean?
And when for example, when you post numbers on, when you post comics on Reddit, you got that little chart symbol at the bottom. You click on that and you see that this comic was viewed by 1,200 people, right? Doesn't count the upvotes, doesn't count the downvotes, doesn't count the comics. Just this was viewed by 1,200 people. I'm more interested in that anymore than I am at standard engagement, because I just want to know that this thing is being out there and it's being seen. I'm confident in my work. I'm confident that I'm doing good work, in that if I'm getting seen by that amount of people, that I'm slowly gaining them over. But I've gotten a lot less interested in favorites and shares and comments. I'm much more, and for that reason, I'm more and more thrilled with what's going on Reddit, because the same comic, I can get much better views on Reddit than on Twitter or any place else. It eclipses it, and I'm a lot more excited about that than I am, because let's face it, we're in late stage social media, and the idea of you and me going viral is out the window. We know that engagement ain't going to do the trick, so I'm focusing on views.
You know what, Brad? Just for conversation, let's change tacks just for a second and talk about comic book publishers.
Okay.
Or maybe more specifically, book publishers, because that's one tangency of one branch of comics that does pay for marketing and publicists, right? But I want to talk about why that is different than what we do. So let's say Brad signs up with Scholastic or Hachette or Penguin, and he's got a new book coming out, right? By the way, that book retails for $30. Brad's making $1 a book on average, right? So Penguin is taking $29. Well, not really, but Penguin's taking $15 of that $30 price. And then they're keeping $14 and Brad's keeping $1. So of that 14, they've got their administrative costs, they've got their in-house, gobbledygook, who cares? But one of those costs is they have an in-house marketing team, maybe if they're still there, an in-house publicist, maybe if it's still there. But what are they trying to do, right? This is where we see cartoonists getting in front of, look at so-and-so's on the New York Times, or so-and-so's at the Washington Post, or so-and-so got on the Toronto Star, that kind of thing. Every once in a while, we see a cartoonist when their new book is coming out and they're in a publication, and you track it back and you're like, oh, okay, I see the marketing team got them in front of that editor or that journalist, right? But what are they trying to do? That's a specific example of they're not trying to get an audience. They're not trying to get readers for that cartoonist. They're trying to get buyers for that book. They're trying to get people to go buy that super widget. That's a very different advertising proposition than what we're trying to do, again, which is to get 100,000 people to read the comic, so the 10,000 people become fans, so that 1,000 people become permanent buyers of our books.
Yeah.
And so their marketing proposition is they have a window of 6 months to get as many people to buy this book in that 6 month period, because after that, it goes on the eternal shelves of the long tail, right, and becomes smaller and smaller sales. So they only have 6 months, so they've got to generate heat and electricity and sparks for that super widget, which is that book in that 6 month window. It's a different marketing proposition, is what I'm saying, than what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Oh, it's it's apples and oranges. You really and the other part that always gets under my skin is that they're also expecting that artist to pull their weight in marketing that book, because the first thing they're going to ask.
Oh yeah, it's not an accident that if you have big social media, you get the deals.
That's
now.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. The first thing they're going to ask before they sign you is, what's your social media numbers, right? You're not getting paid for that, by the way. You're still taking the same dollar a book that that person was getting back when the marketing team was strong, before they laid them all off. Before social media happened, you're still getting that same dollar. They're not compensating you for taking on part of the responsibility of the marketing department. You're doing that for free, all right? But you're being expected to do it nonetheless, which is another reason that I always get my back up about those kind of deals.
Yeah, and remember that advertisers, marketing people, if you look at a lot of traditional print advertising, aside from photographers, who do they call a lot? Cartoonists. Because it's compartmentalized, it's pithy, it's entertaining, it's visually arresting. So we have the tools in our own toolkit to make the things that catch people's eye, that slow them down on their scroll and say, what is this thing, right? And so our job is to continually produce high quality work so that over time, a tiny percentage of those eyeballs come to become our readers.
Yeah. So I guess here's where it ends up for me. If you've been doing this for a few years and you see you're not getting traction, take me up on my advice. I'm telling you, I'm right probably 9 chances out of 10 on this. Find a way to examine and improve your writing. Please, 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 please. It's not your art. It's not your art. The writing has always been in comics. The writing's always been more important than the art. All right. And you came to this as an artist, probably. If you're like most of us, me included, this is what I had to do before I could turn the comic. I had to look with a really, really cold, critical eye. My writing, take me up on it. See if I'm not right. Improve your writing.
Yeah. And I'll 1-2 punch with Brad's. So number 1, improve your writing. Number 2, as a friend, I'll tell you what you can do. Go through my last 100 tweets or Instagrams or Facebook posts, or even better, go through Brad's and use the exact language. I don't care.
Yes.
There, I've just given you a marketing 101. Use all of Brad's language for the last month of tweets, but modify it to fit your comic, and then just tweet. That's all you got to do. Tweet, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, all that stuff. That's your marketing, right? Your comic is doing the heavy lifting, and then just use our old tweets, reword them, and they're yours. There you go, my friend, a gift from us.
It's not hard to figure out. You say you don't understand marketing. I don't know who you are, but I'll bet you listen, you know how I feel about cartoonists. If you can do art, and if you're even trying to get out there and write, your brain is activating at a very high level. All right. You know, that's what I think of you. You're not dumb. You're not a dumb person. if you can learn to do comics, you can learn to do marketing. And like Dave said, if it ain't me, if it ain't Dave, find somebody who's doing well on social media and just mimic what they're doing until you get the hang of it yourself. You say you can't do this. I say you're full of shit. You can do this.
Absolutely. Boy, do I agree with Brad. And one other thing that I'm going to note before, because boy, we've been talking about this for a while, but one thing I'm going to note that I think also might be happening here is that it's not that you don't know marketing. It's not that you can't do marketing, to Brad's point. We know you're smart. You're already creating. I think it's that you don't like talking about yourself, and you don't like promoting yourself, and you don't enjoy the fact that you have to be the cheerleader and the biggest believer in your art. So first of all, I'll say, I get that. I understand. It's hard, but you have to be the prime mover of your comics. You have to make your own magic. You have to believe in yourself when no one else is around you is believing in your comics. And you just have to get better at talking about yourself and how great your comics are and how it's worthwhile for people to check out those comics.
You have to get all of those things, and you have to get over it. You have to get over it.
You got to get over it.
You cannot sit there and say, I don't like doing this. You get 5 minutes of that, and then get over it, and then get to work, because this is how it gets done. All right? You don't get to shrug. You don't get to say, I don't like this. Get over it. Go out there and do it. Listen, it's uncomfortable for me sometimes. It's uncomfortable for Dave sometimes. We all do things that maybe we're not so comfortable with, but we say, I don't like talking about myself this much, but I'm going to do it. Get over yourself. Go out there and do it, doggone it.
And honestly, we're saying this with love because, yes, we felt this, but I will also tell you that the more you do it, it doesn't become as painful as it once was. It gets easier and easier to say, hey, this is a good comic. You should check this out. Hey, I'm doing a Kickstarter. Hey, I've got a Patreon. Hey, I'm doing a talk over here. Or, hey, I'm down at this convention. It becomes easier to talk about yourself the more you do it.
Yeah. Dave, I'm going to be honest with you, even though you said that, I'm actually getting a little bit tired of talking about ourselves. You know who I want to talk about? I want to talk about deSouza.
I cannot wait for this interview, Brad. Let's fire up the mics and do it. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Oh man, Brad, I'm very excited for today's interview because it literally is one of my favorite people and favorite cartoonists in the world. And I don't even know how many years we go back in terms of sharing smiles at San Diego Comic-Con, especially across that aisle. Brad, you go ahead and do the intro because I'm flummoxed with joy. Flummoxed with joy.
My friends, we have the great honor to welcome among us the great deSouza, the illustrator, one half of the creative team that brings us Looking for Group and Least I Could Do. Lar, welcome to the show.
I am so flattered and so honored to be here because if you don't mind my repeating myself, you guys are both inspiring and intimidating listening to ComicLab every week because you guys do it all. You do the hustle, you do the business. You're so steeped in the comics history, the web comics history, the culture, and I have a somer to do all that.
I was going to say, Brad, it's probably worth for the younger cartoonists or folks that might not be familiar with LAR to explain what that means, what the setup is for you, LAR, and how you work and how you put out such amazing work and what the team is behind you.
Well, the team is Ryan Somer writes, I draw. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the deal. I met him now. Oh my God, yeah, we're coming up on 21 years virtually. I got an email out of the blue in 2002 from this guy in Montreal who wants to write comics, and he was looking for a caricaturist. Actually, we were. It was originally the comic we started working together was called In Other News, and it was like an entertainment editorial.
Oh, I didn't know this. Wow!
But it was pre TMZ. We still had our eyes on maybe not syndication, but magazine publication.
Yeah.
But there wasn't like a weekly entertainment magazine. There wasn't a TMZ website. There wasn't the big entertainment beast online. And we just couldn't. We tried Comic Sherpa for a while. We certainly had our own website, but we did it for about 2 years. And during that time, he started Least I Could Do on the side. I was still freelancing. I was doing a lot of caricature gigs. And then he asked me to, actually, no, it was a year, 2003. His original artist, Trevor somebody, who was like a college kid at the time, said, okay, that was fun, I'm gone.
Yeah.
But at the time, I couldn't justify doing 2 web comics in my schedule, and I didn't want to give up Another News yet. So I introduced him to Chad Porter, who's a friend of mine in Toronto. And Chad did it for 2 years, and I almost immediately regretted passing on it.
Oh, yeah.
I really love Ryan's writing.
Yeah.
Not that Chad did a poor job, but after a couple of years, Chad was like, I'm not enjoying this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm here. I got it. No problem.
Yeah. You got your second chance.
And yeah, that seemed to be where things clicked because, Chad had a day job. It took him longer to do the strips. I'm a pretty fast artist.
Yeah.
I was already in a freelance situation where I'm working from home. I have the time. I'm a little faster. I'm, 10 years older and experienced and everything. And that seemed to be what clicked. And Least I Could Do really began to grow. And then after another year, actually, it wasn't even a year, we came up with Looking for Group as sort of another thing to work on. And that was right in that WoW pocket for World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And grabbed hold. And Blizzard Europe especially, was really supportive. They were like retweeting us.
Oh, wow, really?
Things. So yeah, we got suddenly we had this international audience.
Yeah. Because
Blizzard Europe was reposting us everywhere. And it was like, I can do 2 a week unless, if I don't give up Least I Could Do.
Right.
And then I, killed myself over that for 17 issues and finally said, I can't keep doing this pace. And we hired Ed Rosowski to take over coloring duties. Of course, Brad knows Ed, who's brilliant. So Ed's been coloring, making my lines look good ever since.
Yeah. Ed's a great guy. You mentioned caricaturing and your deep roots in caricaturing, and we just got the news that Bill Watterson's coming out with a new book, teamed with a caricature artist. And I was just curious, when you found out about that, what was your thoughts as somebody who has, like I said, deep roots in that art form?
My first thoughts were, where do I pre-order this as fast as possible?
Yeah.
Because John Cash is one of America's great illustrator caricatures.
Mm-hmm.
And, teamed with Bill Watterson's imagination. We all love Watterson's cartoons, but, that's the thing with comics. It's a visual medium, but we can't neglect the writing.
Right.
The bones of it, and, would Calvin and Hobbes been as good if Bill Watterson was a crappy writer?
No.
So we're gonna get that, the genius of that.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly he's probably, collaborating with layouts and stuff with John.
Yeah. Well, let's stay on caricature for a minute, because I will admit, and I think I can speak for Brett on this, that caricature is not our wheelhouse. It's not where we excel. But I will return the kind compliments you sent our way by saying that you are one of the best caricaturists I've ever met. And I'm sort of curious, both how that world interacts, because I know how web cartoonists meet and greet one another. But I was curious because Danielle Corsetto had mentioned once in passing that she went to a caricaturist convention with Tom Richmond in, I don't remember what year or where it was, but And I was curious if you've ever been to that and how you find the caricaturist world.
Yeah, actually, I go to the same conventions. Unfortunately, I've missed the last two because of the world.
Yeah.
But I absolutely adore my caricature family. And actually, I met Danielle via webcomics before I found out she was also a caricaturist.
Oh,
And
really?
we actually had people in
Oh.
common through caricature, and was quite instrumental in bullying her to start going to the cons. Actually, I think we were supposed to room together at that con, and I had to cancel because of family issues. But yeah, it's I understand. It's sort of like artists all went to the same school, and then
Mhm.
Right.
the cartoonists were this club, and the landscape people were that club, and they have some
Yeah.
vocabulary in common, but not everything. And then among the cartoonists, you might have like the editorial cartoonists and the gag cartoonists and the strip cartoonists, and they all share a little more vocabulary, but not 100%. And then you've got the caricaturists that are a subset of those
Yeah.
in some weird Venn diagram that I'm not even going to attempt,
Yeah.
where you've got, they overlap a bit over here and they overlap a bit over there, but their own particular artistic brain damage of, and they've got their own made up words for things as well, sort of niche upon niche upon niche.
Right.
And I don't know. I was the kid who always drew my teachers and my friends. It was always in.
Did you ever do one of those jobs, Laura, where like a party, a graduation, a bar mitzvah,
Yes.
something where you're
Yes.
sitting at the easel? Okay, so here's I talked with Tom Richmond about this one time because he, earlier in his career did like theme parks and stuff. And I am fascinated by this because if I have to, I can turn on my people skills and my charm. I tend to be kind of introverted, as I'm sure all three of us are, but I can turn it on. However, the idea of sitting across from a stranger and then having to turn the easel around and be like, here is my attempt to make fun of your existence, or joyfully poking fun at how you look to the world. How does that work? How does one do that?
I think there's I think I was born lacking the gene to give fucks.
That would help. That would
over a lot of
help.
things. I appreciate and I accept your compliment for my caricature skills, but you go to one of those caricature conventions and gentlemen, you would adore it because it's 200 people from around the world.
Yeah.
Without the restriction of having to make a sale.
Right.
Yeah.
And they are cutting loose, and they are, you get the Tom Richmonds and the Danielles and the Lars, but then you get people like Joe Bloom and Court Jones and Jason Seiler, who are incredible. Steven Silver, who is now one of the character designers in animation, did Kim Possible, did Danny Phantom, did whatever. He started in theme park caricature.
Yeah.
And put together somebody saw him one day and said, hey, you got to submit a portfolio to the studio. And he did. And it led to something else. A lot of people seem to go through caricature on their journey. Some become tattoo artists, some become animation directors, some become children's illustrators.
Yeah.
And it's a really joyful professional development kind of thing because people are willing to experiment.
Yeah, well, listen, this brings up another really great point that I wanted to bring out, and that is I follow an awful lot of cartoonists, an awful lot of comics illustrators, and out of all of them, you have a very rare ability to work in a vast number of different styles. Right. I always tell people, like, sometimes I get a commission that says, I want you to draw something the way John, something in the style of John Romita, or I want you to draw something in the Hanna-Barbera style. And I tell them it took me 30 years to learn how to draw like Brad Geiger. You're going to have to settle for that. You, on the other hand, can masterfully do this wide range. Was your roots in caricature part of that? How do you get from A to B? How do you get to be someone that can do that so deftly?
I don't think the caricaturing in those styles came later. I think just as a kid watching Saturday morning television in the 70s and wanting to draw. I have a clear memory of probably being like 4 years old and being frustrated that I couldn't draw Beanie from Cecil and Beanie.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I could close my eyes and I could see Beanie clearly.
Yeah.
And it was like, if I could draw with my eyes closed, or if I could overlay my imagination on the paper, I could draw him. And it wasn't until, I don't know what, well, I kind of know, because my wife and I do fundraising for the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada every year.
Yes.
And this is our 10th year doing it. And we were looking for a way to fundraise.
Yeah.
And, you know, the typical thing is like, you know, you're going to walk 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers. And I'm like, my wife was signed up for it. And I'm like, they recommended that she try and raise $100. And I'm like, screw that. I have an audience.
Yeah.
Let's appeal to them. But there's such competition for the dollar.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Even just promising somebody a tax receipt isn't enough. So I remember now. They came up with a Powerpuff emulator. So to make you look like a Powerpuff girl or boy.
Right.
And we love the Powerpuff Girls in our family. And somebody did it and I went, this is a travesty.
Yeah.
This is like, they were okay, but they were all kind of simplistic. And they're like, no. And my wife, I think my wife wanted to do it. And I'm like, no, you're not going to do that. I will draw you. And so I drew her and I drew myself and it was really fun. And I said, is this something? Would people donate for a digital caricature in the Powerpuff style?
Right.
And it was a hit. So we did it that year. And so the next year it's like, okay, let's keep doing this because I am confident. And really, it's not as hard as you make it out to be.
Oh, come on now.
You've got the skills, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay. Yes. Listen, there is a realm where Brad and I can do mimicry and can tackle different styles. But I really want to lean into this. You have a uniquely wonderful ability to say, this is my skill set. This is my natural wheelhouse of what I draw. But I'm going to jump into Hanna-Barbera. I'm going to jump into 1950s UPA style. I'm going to jump into The Simpsons. I'm going to jump into this or that. And I think, and I would love for you to talk about this to younger cartoonists, but mimicry, when you do it in cartooning, has a wonderful way of teaching you things and skill sets you can add to your own toolbox.
Yes.
And I see over the years, just as a friend watching you mimic constantly and experimenting but you roll it into your own style over time. And it's been cool to see.
That actually, yes, that is like, if you look at my old sketchbooks from high school, it's me drawing the cartoons. It's me drawing Filmation Thundercats. It's me drawing, Hanna-Barbera. It's me drawing, the 1947 whatever showing after 4 o'clock on Commander Tom, because they've already solved the problems I'm trying to solve.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's really,
you're right.
It's just like, in college, we learn you copy the masters to learn from them. You don't copy them to make a copy.
Right.
You copy them to figure out how they think. You don't copy the final line. You try and emulate the thought process.
The technique.
How did they get there?
Yeah.
And I have to emulate that with the tools I have, starting with like simple 3D shapes and sketchy lines and figuring out what the anatomy or the cartoon anatomy would be. And then realize it's sort of like, if you like the way somebody draws hands, copy their hands.
Yeah.
And then try and digest them into your own wheelbox.
Well, you said something really that I'd love to follow up with, because it's a great way to summarizing it, which is, you said they have already solved a problem that I'm trying to solve. And I'll be honest, anytime that I've ever intentionally done mimicry for a project or just want to see if I could draw in Larson's style or Breathed style or Watterson style, I'll do it. And then I'll realize that as I'm trying to do their line or mimic their line, I realized that they found a more efficient way to do XYZ, and that for decades I've been trying to figure out how to do XYZ efficiently, but Larson already figured that out. Watterson already figured that out. And so I'm like, I'm rolling that into my style. So you're 100% right that the idea of they have figured out a solution to a problem that we're all facing is super true. That's a really, really good point about cartooning.
And I think it's important that you don't get trapped in what brush are you using? What pen are you using?
Yes.
Al Hirschfeld, great American caricaturist, one of my artistic heroes.
Yes.
And I remember seeing there was like a big book of New Yorker cartoons or something in the public library that I used to go over all the time. And it had cartoons. There was another one that had cartoons from all over the world. It had Sampé, it had Searle, it had Hirschfeld. I love that line.
Yeah.
I love that thick lyrical line. So I would practice with a brush because I assumed he used a brush. And it was decades later that I found out he used a dip pen. And very large and uses thousands and thousands of tiny lines. I'm like, thank God, because the only time I used a dip pen was in grade 9 art. And I realize now the nibs were probably dead. It was a horrible experience.
Yeah, of course.
I've since become a fan of nibs, but still, if I try and do something like that, I pull out a brush.
Yeah. Well, now here I see. Dave heard one thing. I heard another in that last portion. So I'm going to go over here. I've said before on the show how a large part of my career, if you can call it that, in comics has been powered by spite. Right. You told me that I couldn't do it, so I did it. Right. And that would from the syndicate rejections that I still have in that drawer over there next to my desk to any number of other people who told me no, I came back with yes. What I heard in your story was you might have had a similar engine, but instead of spite, you're using competition. In other words, you heard $100. I can do 200, 1,000. I can do better than $100. How much of your long career in comics has been motivated by just sheer competition? I'm gonna show them that I can do this.
I don't think you heard right.
According to my wife, that happens an awful lot.
I was gonna say, let's isolate that audio clip just for her. That would be great.
I don't think I felt competition from others. I felt inspiration from others. I want to learn what they do. I want to eat their brain and heart and have their powers. But that's frowned upon by society. So I have to learn to draw instead. And the tools I know how to use are brush and ink. Or at least I think I know how to use. So that's what I would use. And I've since become more of a fan of dip pen because there's no getting away from the joy of tactile work.
Well, let me ask a process question actually, because and this grows out of mimicry and all the benefits it brings us. But for when you started in on beginnings, you took a very different artistic path. And talk about that for a minute, about how you made those choices, and because I think you landed that dive perfectly. Like that was 10 from every judge on the Olympic panel about landing the style for that. So how did you experiment to, and how did you arrive at what you finally got to with that one?
Stoner had been wanting to do a Sunday comic for a long time, and I had been resisting because, damn it, I was already doing
I'm doing enough over
6
here.
days of comics and LFG. And I'm like, I don't want to do a comic. I'm not going to do a 7th least I could do. I'm not doing that. And one day he said, just hear me out. What if it's a retro comic of Little Rain? And I said, damn you, because that's a great idea. And now I'm just like, it's going there.
And a great challenge.
And like you, I grew up on these things. I grew up on Peanuts and some of the old the old Harveys. I realized as a grown up how much I inhaled those. Little Audrey, Casper, Hot Stuff, Little Lotta, Dot. Even I don't know if it was Gold Key or Dell. You had Little Lulu. You had the Nancy. You had all the children in comics kind of thing. And I could just, my brain just started going. That's also kind of a caricaturist habit. I'm sure it's a cartoonist habit too, or an artist habit where I like to say I walk through a world of eye candy. When you look at someone, you kind of go, they'd be fun to draw. I have to remember them for later. Or I have to remember that. Like my wife is used to me saying things like, did you see the eyebrows on her? So that's when I thought, okay, I want to do it, and I want to do it different. And I wanted to make it look, it was still digital, but I wanted it to look
tactile and physical and
not rougher, but with texture.
Mhm.
With,
yeah.
If I could, I would watercolor each one.
Yeah.
If only because I need the practice.
Yeah.
But I wanted it to look like it was inked by hand. Like, sorry, I hate doing that because you're digital, you are inking by hand.
Yeah.
But I wanted it to look like traditional pen on paper. I wanted the skips and the sputters and the little accidental happy accidents.
Yeah.
And so I worked on, originally I made up a brush that had a little more random fluctuation to it. So the line was uneven. I've since switched to better brushes because people have better things. I even actually, I went back to digital in the past year because of family issues with my mother. But I actually spent a couple of years printing out the blue lines and inking it by hand.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
wow.
With pen and ink, and then scanning that back in and digital coloring it. And again, like rougher coloring, looser textured brushes to get that, not watercolor, but just a rougher sense. So it's a callback both, I think, to an older age of comic.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
A Harriman line, a rougher color, but as well as evocative of the little boy with the crazy imagination.
Yeah.
Right. Well, can I actually, speaking of process, I think I sang your praises about this before on the show, but I have to tell, and speaking of camaraderie in the community of comics, I have to sing Lars praises because when we were doing stripped, and I've told this story before, Watterson mailed me the original art, right? And it was gorgeous and but physically very small, and we had to make it big. So we took it to this really special scanner in LA that could do something like 12,000 DPI, so that if we blew it up to whatever we needed it to be, it would be amazing. This is whole special advertising scanner. Anyway, long story short, I needed to clean it up because I wanted it to look like the back cover of, I think it was The Days Are Just Packed, one of the Calvin and Hobbes books, where it's a pure white cover with the artwork on the back. So I emailed Watterson and I was like, hey, how did you clean up the artwork so that it looked this way, pointing to the cover?
Yeah.
How did you do that? And he emailed back. He's like, I don't know. I sent it to the publisher and they did it, which was not the answer that I expected. And so I actually put the call out in the cartooning community, and I was very oblique about it because I hadn't revealed that it was Watterson yet. And I was like, hey, does anybody know how I might mimic this style on the back? And out of all the cartoonists in the world, Laura reached out and knew the solution, knew how to do like 20 stages in Photoshop of how to do it. And I just want to say, as a friend, without any recompense, without any promise of, hey, this is going to happen, you were so kind to pay your knowledge forward to another cartoonist. And I really, really appreciate that. And I celebrate that for what we all should be doing as cartoonists. It was a wonderful kindness that I will always be thankful to you for.
It was absolutely my pleasure. I am a firm believer that there are no secrets. The whole apprenticeship grinding up pigments with a secret formula, that day is done. There's no secrets, and it's all, for me, it's a case of high tide raises all boats.
Yeah.
I have no secret, and all I'm going to, if I tell you my workflow and it works for you, that's going to enable you to make better art,
right,
facilitate your ease to improve. And then that in turn will inspire me, because you'll be churning out better stuff and I'll go, hot damn, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I'll get all energized. And so, I mean, it's like, what brush do I use? Here, this is the brush I use. You can get it from this person. They're brilliant.
Well, it's a big part of why Brad and I do this show, because it's also, we're no longer, I'm forgetting the phrase, but it's no longer a closed system where for you to succeed, I have to fail, or for Brad to succeed, you and I have to fail. We can all lift those boats up because the audience is nigh unlimited in the English-speaking world for the comics that we produce. So I'm with you.
I mean, I'm happy to admit my envy of like, God damn it, I wish I thought of that first.
Yeah.
Or or why are they getting the accolades? I'm here. I've been doing it through. But that's also not like, I'll let myself have that little private whine.
Yeah.
And then put it away and say, hooray, there's good art being put out in the world. There's great art being put out in the world.
Yeah.
And My analogy is always, you don't know. You throw the ripples, you throw your stones into the pond, and you don't know where those ripples will touch.
Yeah. And in fact, sometimes those ripples might not hit their intended target for 80, 100 years after we're gone, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing that really took it home to me was a number of years ago, you know, whenever I see an art posting on Twitter or Facebook, whatever, I just retweet it just automatically. I'm not looking for a job, but somebody else is.
Yeah.
And I retweeted something about an animation gig. And I think the gig was actually in Toronto. So, you know, near me anyhow. And then like a year and a half later, I got an email from a young animator in South Africa. And he replied to it, and they hired him to work remotely. And it was for the Clerks animated cartoon.
Ooh.
So it was quite a feather in his cap to work with Kevin Smith.
Sure.
And it was like, I'll never be to South Africa. I've never met this person, whatever. But because I took that action and let it go, somebody else had a major boost to their young career.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't know. And you can't expect any kind of gratitude back. You just have to throw out the stone, let it ripple, and be happy that you caused some ripples.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, speaking of your kindness, I know your MS fundraiser goes until May. And right now you're doing custom Lego minifig illustrations, correct? That people can use as avatars?
Yes, those are until the end of February. So that one's nearly done.
Oh, okay.
March is going to be Schoolhouse Rock.
Nice.
Oh, great. Oh, by the way, your Abbott Elementary Schoolhouse Rock. Oh,
yeah, that was great.
That was great.
There's another internet magic story.
Yeah, tell us.
I got a call from the fellow. I mean, LA shows up on my phone, and I'm like, but it wasn't an 866 number. So I thought, let's see.
Yeah.
So anyways, he got my number from a mutual friend who's an internet animator who I met just because we like the same cartoon stuff on the internet. And he's an animator and longtime friends with this guy who's a prop master for Abbott Elementary. And Abbott, the fellow Skip was saying, I wanted to do a cast caricature as a wrap party gift. And he's like, if you need a guy who can draw Schoolhouse Rock, you got to call Lar.
Yeah.
So he calls me all the way in Canada to say, hey, can you do this? I'm like, normally I would charge you more, but I'm doing it for charity in March. So if you just donate to the charity, I'll do. And
the end result was gorgeous. For those that have not seen it, I'm not actually sure how I would link to someone in vocally, but if you search for Lar and Abbott Elementary and Schoolhouse Rock, I'm sure 5 seconds of Googling, you'll find it. It's an amazing, amazing piece of work.
And if you want more information on Lar's work for charity, right now it's your pinned tweet on your Twitter feed. Is that correct? And your Twitter is Lartist, Lartist. So if you go to Twitter and look up Lar as Lartist, you'll see that as the pinned tweet. So Lar, thank you so much for being with us this week. We really appreciate talking comics with you. We can see your work on Looking for Group and Least I Can Do, which we will link in the show notes. But until the next time, my friend, thank you so much. This has been a blast.
You're welcome. And I post lots of random stuff on my socials. So if those comics don't do it for you,
there's always something. It's one of my favorite Twitter feeds. There's always something going on.
As long as Twitter lasts or whatever rises from the ashes.
In terms of workaholic, if you don't like those two comics, Lar will post 17 other comics on his socials that he drew today. So rest assured, you can find it over at Lartist on Twitter and Instagram.
Like I'd say, it's my work, it's my hobby, and it's my therapy.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you, my friend. All the best for the year ahead.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, back at Brad. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Dave, so much.
And on that note, you've been listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
A huge shout out and our thanks to Lar for coming on the show. What a delightful talk and a delightful person and a delightful cartoonist. Please go check out his work. And I will remind you that your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my close personal friend, Dave Kellett, the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped, and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com, and Drive at drivecomic.com.
Now, how did I go from being personal friend to close personal friend? When did I get elevated?
You know what it was? So the Weird Al Yankovic fan club is close personal friends of Al. And I know this from the 1980s when I had a friend in high school that was a huge Al fan. And so for some reason, that phrase, close personal friend, always runs together in my mind.
That's a dag. Of all the answers I did not expect Weird Al Yankovic to come in. That actually warms my heart. I'm very glad I asked. The Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from the very talented Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net, and you should go check out Andy's music. It is fantastic. And this episode was edited by the ever delightful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions, and we thank Matt so much. He makes us sound so good from what we start with. We originally sound like two trolls in a cave, and Matt makes us sound beautiful. Matt's work can be found over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your future. You may hear your holy moly.
Matt, do not edit that. You may hear your feature featured.
You may hear your review featured on a future episode. And by the way, usually when we do reviews here, this is from my son, my older son, who's going to college at Temple University. Listen, they've been keeping up on the podcast because they walk into school, and because they got done with the Behind the Bastards podcast, and they were looking for something. They came on to Comic Lab, so they've been listening to a lot of Comic Lab. This is a series of text messages I got just last week. First one. I can always tell who came up with which Comic Lab topic by what they're talking about. Here's the second one. The ones Dave Kellett leads are always, do we deserve love? And the ones that Dad leads are 9 reasons why I hate you. So evidently, according to my son, I'm coming off with a little bit of a hard edge.
Oh, that's amazing. Do we deserve love? And 9 reasons why. 9 reasons. Okay, on today's Comic Lab, 14 the reasons why you're a bastard son of a bitch. This is a topic that Brad brought onto the show. He wanted to introduce it to everyone. Oh.
And I've got a list here. Here's number 1. Look in the mirror, dummy. Here's number 2.
Please tell them that delighted me to no end, Brad. That is a dang delight. I will finish this off by saying Comic Lab is made possible by your support over at patreon.com/comiclab. And I will go ahead and say that twice with the big pitch. If you've been enjoying the show, if you've been getting value out of what we've been trying to share with the world in the ways we've been trying to pay forward our mistakes, our lessons, our hopes for what you can do with your career, do join us over at patreon.com/comiclab. It means the world, and honestly, the community and advice you'll get there is worth the price of admission.
It's also kind of cool that she did that Shaka Khan. She used her name musically. Like everybody knows that whole thing where you repeat Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan, Shaka Khan. That I could never get away with doing that. I could never stand at a microphone and say Brad Geiger, Brad Geiger, Brad Geiger. Nobody would just sit for that, but she could pull it off.
Well, because her name, I mean, think about the music, the metronome nature of Shaka Khan. That's so great.
Yeah.
Versus Brad Geiger. It sounds Brad Geiger, bradgeiger.com. It's like
it's a little bit guttural to be musical.
By the way, Dave Kellett's not better than Dave Kellett. I'm actively wetting my pants, Dave Kellett.
It's better than passively wetting them.
That's me in 30 years.
Passively wetting your pants.